Successful people are incredibly successful because they know how to deal with the things that they don't know just as well as the things that they do know. They all have this framework that has made them successful. For those that are new here, I'm Davie Fogarty. My Shopify stores have done over $400 million in sales. I wish I had this framework when I first started. Let's get into it. The first step, defining the decision. You want to be very specific. So if I'm going to say, should I expand my business to the United Kingdom? That is not a great decision. That is not specific. A better one is expanding to the UK the best use of my capital and time at this stage to produce free flowing cash, because that might be my goal. Now, there's actually a matrix that we can use to really understand that. It's called the Eisenhower's matrix. It's pretty easy to remember. All you need to do is draw a y-axis and an x-axis. And up here, you've got urgent, not urgent. And then you've got important and not important. In the top left quadrant, we've got urgent and important. These are the things that we need to do like right away because they're both urgent and important. The not urgent but important, we need to actually schedule these. This is where time blocking comes in, really important, making sure that, if it's got a deadline eventually, we're not leaving it to the last minute, but making sure that it is recognized and we're, progressing it on a little bit. This is where we can delegate. We can give it to someone else so we can free up our own time. We're going to delete these things because why are we wasting our time? And then the next step that we're going to do is we're going to get the people in the process. We're going to people the process, I like to say. We don't actually want to distract people in the early stage if it's not a problem or if it's really not urgent and there's other pressing issues. If you are CEO or the manager, you need to be able to prioritize these kind of issues as well. Let's say we have decided that it is urgent or it is important and the time to decide about it is now. This is when we get people in. You can do a brainstorming session, write down kind of the people that have first-hand versus theorized knowledge. First-hand knowledge is they have experienced the thing or have a high degree of conviction within the circle of competence, whereas theorized knowledge, it should be discounted. This might be someone that knows someone that has dealt with it. While you're trying to get as much information as possible, it really is a balance. You're kind of seeking two conflicting opinions so that you can judge those opinions based on merit. At the same time, as Ray Dalio says though, you're better off not asking uninformed people because it's just going to confuse you. Sometimes that's better than having no answers at all. One thing that I found very, very useful and practical is actually just going on LinkedIn or Twitter and doing a post trying to find an expert in the subject. Then I kind of classify the expert. Do they have first-hand experience or can they recommend me to someone that has? The questions that you can ask these people is, do you think this is the problem? Have you experienced this before or heard of anyone that has? How did they or you solve it? Or do you have anyone else that I can talk to about this topic? Now, one thing I will point out is when you're talking to these people, you can actually really shape their decision-making. As a leader or, someone that they're trying to help, they will generally just agree with you. Now, this is really important around how you frame the story and frame the facts so that you aren't getting your biases into their story because they're just going to agree with you. One situation that is a prime example of that is I had a decision to make. I went to all of my advisors, mentors, incredibly smart people, and I framed it in the wrong way and it ended up costing me millions in a legal battle. The other thing to consider in this situation is two other concepts, which is skin in the game and incentives. If you're consulting someone within your organization or like an advisor that gets paid for success, of course their decision making and their inputs into the thing is going to push you to what helps them, and that's just a natural human desire. They have their own confirmation biases. On the flip side, it is really beneficial if someone has skin in the game, and what we mean by that, if they actually have investment on the line, they may be less prone to take risks and make better decisions as well. So really do weigh those things up to make sure that you're talking to the right people and getting the right data for your next few steps. So the third step is actually just getting as many alternatives as possible. You can add this to the master doc that we've been preparing in the first and second stage. Sit with the person or sit by yourself. It could be a whiteboarding session with your team, and you're just going to write as many alternatives for the decision as possible, because the truth is there may be a situation where you can have your cake and eat it too. I think too many people look at decisions as there's two binary outcomes. It's like either do this or do that. And there's been lots of studies showing that if there's more options, executives make better decisions. One good exercise here is actually the vanishing options test. So for example, if you're thinking about hiring a new employee to do TikTok? Should we make a hire to grow this channel? And you might want to remove that option in your workshop so that people are forced to think about it differently. That will make people think about what are some other systems and processes that we could do. It might be that someone within the team has work that they're doing that's providing no value, that they have some level of creativity that they can go and help you there. The next step is to classify the complication. I'm going to use 2 frameworks here that you can incorporate in this step. The first one is from Jeff Bezos, and it was in one of his shareholder letters. Again, we've got a 4x4 matrix, as we usually do. So at the top, we've got irreversibility, and we've got a line across here where this is high and this is low. And then on this side, we've got consequentiality. And then we've also got a similar arrow where this is high and this is low. In this top quadrant, top left quadrant, we've got a very highly irreversible decision. So meaning that we can't actually go back on it once we decide. And then it's got very, very high consequences. So a good example of this would be like a big operating expense. You're going to build a new factory. You're going to rent a new office that you're going to grow into. That's like a 3-year lease. So in these situations, we're going to be slow and we're going to be calculated because it's very, very hard to go back. In this top right section, we've got a thing that possibly is reversible. So it's not a one-way door, but it's got high consequentiality. So it's a really important decision. This is where, for example, this could be, you're a single person founder and you're like, okay, is TikTok ads going to work for me? I can buy all the media myself. It's not going to have a huge opportunity cost. Should I test this new channel? It's very low irreversibility. You just turn off the channel. In terms of consequence, it could be quite high because you could double your business by creating a new marketing channel. So with this, you're going to test and you're going to learn and you're going to execute it relatively quickly as well because it's a high impact task. In the bottom quadrants, we actually have Jeff Bezos refers to as type 2 decisions. Now, he just thinks that you should just decide on those quickly. And he generally gets his, executives or the person that's best placed to make the decisions to just decide fast and act. Now, this is actually a categorization model, which you can actually look at a sense-making model. I believe that maybe Jeff Bezos kind of adapted the Cynefin framework, which I'm going to show you now. Kind of different looking matrix here. So the idea of the framework is basically you're trying to put the problem, the thing that you're trying to decide to solve into one of these categories. Down the bottom right, we have what's called the obvious. Now, a lot of people think kind of all of their decisions fall into this category. This is where there's known knowns. And basically you can categorize it in this section and you can apply best practice. The step-by-step process that you would use for something like an obvious decision, which let's say, for example, you're getting a lot of customer service emails. Should you apply, a basic CRM framework or like sign up to Gorgeous? That is, best practice. It exists. You've got a very simple problem with cause and effect. With this section, you're going to sense, then you're going to categorize, and then you're going to respond. We're sensing that we've got a problem. We've got lots of emails. We're going to categorize it into, a standard issue. We can Google it. It's just common. And then we're going to respond. We don't really need to do too much more aside from rolling out the issue. Now, one thing that may come up is this obvious section. You might not need the entire decision-making framework that we're going through because you're not really involving other people in the process and it's quite a simple decision. So that's kind of where, once you get really good at this, when you're defining the problem, you'll generally sense how much, if you need to get other people involved. That's why I gave you those initial questions. If it is complicated, which is actually this top right section, you're going to be glad we have our framework that we're going through. So with complicated, this is where there's known unknowns. So the best course of action is sense, analyze, and then respond. Now, I like to really put a lot of business decisions within the complicated section. There's variables that exist. They're complicated variables, but there is some level of good practice or best practice, and we're generally sensing the issue, then we're analyzing it, we're bringing people in, and then we're responding with, as I said, good practice. And a really good example of this, business forecasting. Is your business going to grow year on year? Like, what is the seasonality curve? You might need to bring in your operations team. The top left section is actually complex. Now, this is where you're going to probe, sense, and respond. Now, this is where there's unknown unknowns. Now, the main reason that I really like Cynefin framework is it is humbling, because if we can classify something as complex, we know that we can't have a high degree of conviction around the solution because there's an emerging practice, but it might not be good or best practice. New product development. There are so many times anyone that's had a business that's launched secondary products, like even at the Oodie, we have a high degree of conviction around these product categories, invest lots in them, and we're guaranteed this is going to work. It is a complex system. There's different competitors for that product category, or the ad ecosystem might not enjoy that type of content around that product. Chaotic. Now, this is probably less relevant to business, but you're going to act, sense, and respond. Now, this is basically where everything just absolutely goes to a mess. A good example of this is the Tylenol crisis. People were putting cyanide capsules within the Tylenol packets. Johnson & Johnson in that situation, the seller of Tylenol, was thrown into a chaotic situation where lives are at risk. They really needed to act before probably getting all the information that they'd want to, both for, people's safety and also their brand longevity. They managed to, pull it all off the shelves very, very quickly, and then do further analysis after that. So, probably less likely you're going to be thrown into a chaotic situation. It is our job as entrepreneurs and CEOs to avoid chaotic situations by risk analysis before it becomes a chaotic situation. And this is, I think, another thing that I love about the Cynefin framework. We tend as entrepreneurs and business owners to build systems to make things obvious all the time. So we're trying to put things into the obvious category. We build certain meeting cadences where we're like, okay, we meet on this every week, forecasting is a good example, or, marketing plans and stuff like that. And we're like, this is working. And then an iOS privacy update hits, and then we're thrown into a chaotic situation or a complex situation. And this is why it's drawn a little bit weird, because this section here is actually a cliff. We're operating in this obvious section without, constantly analyzing it and adjusting it. And then suddenly we find ourselves in one of these situations. So it's basically a lesson of not being complacent, always kind of analyzing it and doing risk analysis. Now, once you've gone through either the Jeff Bezos or the Cynefin framework, you might want to go back to step 1 or step 2. This is because you might have a lesser degree of conviction because you understand the complexities around the system. So the next step I love to refer to as data the decision. Now, this is really, really important, and you can't skip this step because we are human beings and we generally have a lot of biases that affect our ability to make the right decision in these situations. You've got 2 types of biases that you need to be very, very aware of. The first one is confirmation bias. Generally, when we go into these decision making, we have some level of original position that we have, and that original position is based on previous life experiences or previous things we've been told. The truth is we might be wrong, but we have this initial position that is hard to dislodge. We need to remove this if we're going to think objectively about the decision and solve the problem accordingly. Data is one of the best ways to do this. The second thing we need to consider as well is loss aversion. I think that this is a really, really big one for someone that is already successful. Humans typically feel losses twice as badly as they feel wins. So generally when we have something that is worth keeping, we really, really try to avoid losing it. Now, what this generally means is we can sometimes become very risk adverse. There are countless examples of this, obviously, within business. Like, you want to be Netflix, you don't want to be Blockbuster. They obviously had a huge amount of loss aversion for their existing business model, their huge amount of stores and stuff like that. They failed to make their products digital, and then Netflix obviously started taking their market share. The main thing that I like to do once I have, the alternatives and I've started to get a lot of data, I like to make a decision-making tree and try to assign probability to that. One of the key things with the decision-making tree is the formula return on invested capital. We are constantly looking at decisions that we make within business around return on invested capital or return on invested time as well, if we're a solo entrepreneur. So for example, let's work with a growth plan. We've got 2 options as a business. We can either create a new product, launch it in our existing region, or we could expand globally, like my UK example before. So here we have growth plan, and then we have our 2 decisions, out this way and out this way. We have new product and we've got new region. Now, looking at this, you probably spotted a flaw. We've got new product, a new region, but because we've mapped out all of our alternatives before, we also know that there's a fourth option, which is actually do nothing, which is basically we're going to continue investing our funds into our existing products and our existing region as well. So we've got all of our decisions here now, but we need to start adding data to this decision-making tree so we can start visualizing it. Now, the new product, we're going to use a return on invested capital framework. This might cost $50,000 to create. Now, you've got to get your team to come up with a product. There's a lot of development. The MOQs of the order is going to be high rather than, say an existing region where you're just selling your existing products. This might only cost like $10,000 because all you really need to do is grab the product from your warehouse that already exists and pay the shipping costs. You might need to set up a warehouse or a 3PL, which is relatively cheap. So we've got, a significant difference in costs here. And then we've obviously got do nothing, which cost is $0, which isn't actually the case, which I'll get into in just a little bit when we look at the returns of this, but it's something to consider there as well. So the next step that I like to do is actually just draw a line down here, and we're going to do our return on invested capital. So basically, if we say, let's say we invest $1,000 into this new product and we make $100,000, that's 1,000% return on invested capital. You could use percentages, but let's just say dollar amount. This product is going to make us $100,000 over a set period of time. Remember, you need to keep the time variable consistent across this. Hitting a new feature product for Oodie, it's not going to beat the Oodie. We might just be happy that it's doing, say 10% within that region of that product category. The second option here is perhaps we are able to sell the new product, but it's not a huge success. There's no really returns, but we're able to kind of sell the inventory at cost and get our money back. So let's just say we have $0 here. The other option is it completely bombs. We spent all the money on development, all of the money on people as well, and it turns out that we minus the $50,000 here. Now, if we're going new region, let's say there's a good chance that if this region works, let's use the UK versus Australia example. The region is, considerably bigger than Australia. The trend is really hot. So we might be able to expect, a $1 million return for this option because we can apply all of our same processes. Despite, the initial cost being $10,000, we're going to have to reinvest more in inventory, obviously, but we're talking about upfront, the returns, the data that we're going to get from this decision that we're about to make, whether to invest in a new product or send some product over to the UK. The probably middle tier, again, is, let's say $0, where we get the stock there and we have to clear it at cost. There's always going to be a couple of options there. And then the other one is minus $10,000, which we've invested into the product. And then, of course, down here, we've got $0. Now, the final step that I like to do is I like to look at all of these options and I go, okay, which is most likely? Let's say the new product hitting success in my existing region is maybe, based on my past success, is maybe a 30% chance. In terms of clearing it, might be more of like a 60% chance, and then there's a 10% chance I'll lose it all. I'm just giving some examples here. And then in terms of the new region, what I'll look at is, considering I will look at a lot of different variables, some of them that I've just mentioned, but there's maybe, a 60% chance that I can make this new region work with all of my existing systems, maybe 30%, and then again, a 10% chance that it will fail. And then, this is obviously 100% because it needs to add up to 100%. So just by visualizing this, you can see that the best option is probably to do a new region with my existing products because there's a significant upside, a lower upfront cost, and not that much downside. The one thing I will talk about is around doing nothing is a big factor of, by doing nothing, you're basically saying that that time and that capital should be applied to your existing framework, your existing flywheel. So you could calculate your return on invested capital. Let's use Oodie, for example, for our existing regions and our existing product categories. What is our return on invested capital there? And that should actually be this metric down the bottom right. So if you are a new entrepreneur, the truth is that this doesn't actually incorporate all the data that you're going to need. You might want to be looking at more things than return on invested capital, like cash flow as well, because this new region, as I referenced before, while the upfront cost to get to the more data and to feel out the decision may require a significant amount of cash upfront before we can realize this $1 million of return on invested capital. So keep that in mind as well. Also keep in mind the opportunity cost of your team and what they're currently working on, as well as other risks that we kind of can highlight through the rest of the process. So if we can recap, we've basically decided if the problem's worth solving, we've gone through all of the alternatives, we've brought people in, we've classified the problems, we've identified risks through categorizing the product, we've really used data to refine our decision making. Now it's time to actually decide. Now, it's really important that when you're leading teams, that once you make the decision, the whole team rallies behind the decision. There can be really thoughtful disagreement during the process, during what we've just talked about. But once you have a high degree of conviction, this is the path that you need to do, then everyone needs to rally behind it. Now, this can be done through milestones, such as, if we look at the categorization method and we're like, okay, we only need to probe, sense, and then respond, then we may be able to build some tests around the decision rather than just going fully in. This is where I do like OKRs, because we can basically go, let's say we're talking about new product diversification. You can put a really small milestone 3 months out that you're going to at least get that product up on Facebook ads to test if it's going to work in the future. You don't want to put a KPI or something like that with your team to say, we need to do $500,000 in sales for this product category when you don't even know it's going to work. If there's no urgency around the decision, make sure that you build some sensible tests to cover your risk as well. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you leave some feedback below. I know it can be a little bit dry, but this kind of stuff is going to change your life, and just being a little bit more pragmatic and slow to make the decisions where you're able to make slowly is really going to get you out of a lot of mess. So in terms of a series of questions and also this entire framework, I'll leave it in our mentorship group and you can go join and check it out there. Yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks.